Welcome to the Love Letters to Our Bodies podcast. I'm your host, Gwendolyn Mitchell, founder and CEO of Moyo Institute and lifelong spiritual seeker and energy worker, here for thoughtful conversations about health, healing, and happiness by, for, and about Black and African American women. Disclaimer, the Love Letters to Our Bodies podcast does not provide medical advice. The opinions, experiences, and insights shared are for informational purposes only. Nothing shared in this podcast is intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other healthcare provider. Don't disregard or delay seeking it because of what you've heard on this podcast. Thank you. Are you ready? Let's dive in. Welcome to the Love Letters to Our Bodies, a conversation about health, healing, and happiness for, by, and about Black women. We're in season 1 and focusing on women journeying with cancer, especially women who've turned what could have been a tragedy into a triumph. Our guest today is one of my favorite people, Erin Bionic Brown, for the episode Losing a Leg and Gaining a Life Purpose. Let me tell you a little bit about Erin. She's a dynamic Black woman from the Bahamas who has had cancer and is now thriving. Erin Bionic Brown is her name. She is an above-the-knee amputee from bone cancer, osteosarcoma, who has leaned into her identity as an athlete and inspired a movement of disability inclusion in the Bahamas. And she has the distinction of being the first Black woman with a disability, the first Bahamian, and the first para-triathlete in maritime history to be named godmother of a Royal Caribbean International vessel, the Royal Caribbean International Odyssey of the Seas. This is a well-deserved honor usually reserved for royalty, heads of state, and celebrities. Erin and her firm, Erin Brown Connects, are focused on disability advocacy and inclusion management, both nationally and internationally. Erin currently leads the University of the Bahamas Office of Disabilities and Compliance, where she's carrying out the mission of increasing access, inclusion, and opportunities for students and educators with disabilities. Dubbed Erin Bionic Brown, she became the first para-triathlete from the Bahamas to train in the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Center in Colorado Springs in 2019, where she was classified as the Bahamas' first PTS2 female para-triathlete, making it possible for her to compete in the 2020 Paralympic Tokyo Games para-triathlon qualifier. From these opportunities, she was positioned to lead the charge to establish the Bahamas Paralympic Committee. And these are just a few of her honors and achievements. Join me in welcoming our guest, Erin Bionic Brown. Welcome, Erin.
Thank you for having me. It is an absolute pleasure to be back.
I am so delighted to have you because you are a true inspiration to everyone who's met you, everyone who's heard you speak, and to all of the women who've attended the Love Letters to Our Bodies workshops. They ask about you and for you time and time again. So thank you so much for joining here today.
Thank you.
Erin, I'd like to start by asking you to just share with our listeners a little bit about your journey. Like, how did you discover you had cancer? And then what happened?
Well, my journey has been a very thought-provoking one. I literally was home on a school break and I fell. And being an athlete, I usually recover very, very quickly. And I didn't. And so I went to the doctor to get it checked out. And they did the necessary diagnosis of MRIs, x-rays. But they immediately then told me I needed to leave the Bahamas and go ahead and seek treatment in Florida. My first physician was an oncologist. It still didn't kind of dawn on me what it was other than I felt I just needed surgery. But I was diagnosed with stage 4 osteosarcoma after doing a biopsy. My bone was fingernail thin, and I had to wear a cast from my toe to my hip and waited for the results. And I started aggressive chemotherapy right after that. That lasted about almost 2 years, which resulted into an amputation.
And how old were you then when this happened?
I was 23.
Wow, that's really, really young. And you say paper thin, your bone was
Mhm.
fingernail thin.
Yes, fingernail thin. That's how they described it to me. So apparently it had not broken. It had flexed when I fell. So I fell because the bone flexed. And when they did the x-ray, they realized that it wasn't broken and hence why I needed the cast because they did not want it to break while I was doing the treatment.
Oh, that's really something. So tell me now, you go to Florida, you get treatment, and well, you go to Florida to seek treatment. And what happened then?
So when I was told I had stage 4 and I had to come over for chemotherapy, I honestly thought it was a pill. My mother had passed from SLE, systematic lupus, and I watched her go through that. And so in my mind, it was okay, I've been diagnosed with something, there's a plan, we need to execute this plan. But I never up to that date heard about chemotherapy. And so going to Florida, I immediately got an EKG. They inserted a port. And that Monday, I was starting chemotherapy. So I told my son, who was about 6 months at the time, I was coming back home over the weekend. But that didn't happen.
And how long were you away from him?
I was away from home. Boy, I got my amputation. I do think it was in 2006. I was diagnosed in 2004. And I returned home in 2006 because I remembered because my son was starting school pre-K that September. So I made it back home to be there for that.
Wow, wow. 23 years old. I can't even imagine having to confront something so incredibly challenging at that young age. We usually think about cancer as something that happens to old people or definitely older people. So that must have been quite a shock.
It was, but I think for me, what I recognize now, going through that with my mother, be her being diagnosed with lupus and being there with her every day, it somehow settled me. I didn't have the average response to the diagnosis, and I didn't have the average response to the treatment or even the cancer journey. And I really honestly say I pulled from what I remember going through with my mom because I was now a mom and I had a son that I was taking care of.
And I recall from the workshop that you shared with us that you were in the airport when you met someone who turned out to be a godsend. You want to share about that?
Yes. So I always laugh when persons talk about that day because one thing persons say to me is, you can talk to some strangers. Like, you don't have to know anybody. You have a big conversations. And it was a gentleman. I was going back for my monthly checkups because when you're in remission, you go from weekly to monthly to yearly and then spaced out check ins. And during one of my monthly check ins, I sat down to a gentleman with my son. My son had developed separation anxiety, so I couldn't leave him when I traveled. He would always go with me for my rehab, anything that I'm doing, I took him with me. So we were both waiting for our flight to board, and a gentleman asked what happened. When I told him I was a cancer survivor, he's like, well, are you thinking about getting a limb? And I said, I thought about it. I looked it up. It's about $50,000. And he said, well, if you had the money to get it, would you get it? And I told him no. I told him no. And he looked at me and I was very honest with my answer because I said to him, $50,000 I can put down on a house. We can't live in a prosthetic leg. And he said, you know what? That's very true. But he said, well, if you had one, what would you do? And I told him I would do the marathon. We started having the marathon here in the Bahamas around that time. And I said, I'd love to do the marathon, but I don't think they'll let me do it through crutches or a wheelchair. So we exchanged numbers. I left, didn't think to hear from him again. When he came back to the Bahamas, he contacted me and I was fitted for a test socket, which turned into a prosthetic.
Mhm. That's incredible. Just meeting in the airport, and he turned out to be the person who was responsible for your getting your bionic leg. Yes.
Yes, definitely. It's a sea leg. So I was able to walk, but I was also able to kind of do a hopscotch, we kind of call it in the Caribbean, where it's like skipping. It's
Mhm.
because the sea leg, you can't necessarily run, but that led to me now where I now have a running leg and a cycling leg. So yes, it was my first initial leg.
Beautiful, beautiful. And so, did you have to pay the $50,000 or?
No, absolutely not. God is good. No, I didn't. And it didn't cost. And he said to me, it didn't even cost all that, Erin. And it's because I didn't put any coverings or anything over it. It was basically a socket and a titanium leg and a foot. And he kept asking me, you sure you don't want to cover it? We can make it look like your skin and this and that. And I'm like, this is a part of me. I'm okay with person seeing it as it is because it's there for a purpose.
Oh, that's incredible. The Love Letters to Our Bodies podcast is sponsored by Moyo Institute Incorporated, a nonprofit organization offering heart-centered educational experiences, and the Lloyd Symington Foundation, which supports visionary grassroots cancer programs. I really love your attitude. And I really believe that it was no coincidence that you were sitting right next to that person. It just shows how when we are operating from a good place internally, how things just line up to support us. And so there's always this connection between what's happening on the inner world and what's happening in the outer world. And I think your perspective and your perception about what was happening and the fact that you didn't allow it to pull you down, but you just really embraced it and started moving forward, the universe started lining up things to support you. And this was one of those things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I call it my divine purpose. I am
Yeah.
definitely in my purpose.
Beautiful, beautiful. And what's been so incredible as I've followed your journey since that time is that you have become this major force for the disability community. And why was that important to you?
I don't know if I want to use the word important.
Mhm.
It was, I think it's something that just happened. So when I've always been an athlete, I grew up in a household that was about sports, community involvement, spirituality, grassroots movements, nation building. So it's a very active household. And so for me, I just was to me integrating and finding ways to get back into thriving, being able to engage persons, teaching persons, adapting my environment. So something that started off as a self-advocacy journey for me to reintegrate myself or redefine who I am, literally catapulted into, listen, we was waiting for you, ma'am. And we are so glad that you're here. And so then I was able to open up and talk to my own community, talk to non-disabled allies, talk to companies and businesses and nationally and globally. And I mean, it is a part of the divine purpose.
Beautiful, beautiful. It's definitely, clearly a part of the divine purpose. So, Erin, what has been the major thing that you've learned on this journey?
I have learned on this journey that it's okay to be 1000% you in every shape, color, mood, feeling, expression. I feel like I've been taught and reminded daily that my authentic self is exactly where, who, how, when I need to be. And that has been a very powerful journey, but it has been a very frightening one at the same time.
Wow, that's incredible. That's incredible. I was reading somewhere where a study's been done to kind of measure the impact of authenticity. And the gentleman said that the ratings are for authenticity is more powerful than love. Can you imagine that?
Oh,
I mean,
wow.
when I hear that, I think about, well, they're talking about love with a small L, because nothing is more powerful than the love with the big L,
The big L.
the big L love, right? But definitely, and more as I listen to people,
Mhm.
particularly people who've had like near death experiences and come back, they come
Mm.
back with the message that you are here to be you.
Yes.
You are here to love you. You are here
Mhm.
to accept you.
Mhm.
And I think it's just incredible that you didn't have to have a near death experience and you've got those messages.
Absolutely. I'm happy that I didn't have to do that either. But you're right. And you know what? Authenticity is love. It is love for self, it is love for your value. I mean, I'm not afraid to make mistakes anymore. I'm not afraid to be misunderstood, criticized. I realize that that's just part of the journey now. And so, even though something that persons may have seen as something so tragic and life altering for me, that was transformed into something that was absolutely needed for me to get to this point.
Beautiful. One of the things that you said earlier was that you grew up in this very active, conscious family. And I think that makes a huge difference as well, because we know that the messages that you get imprinted with as a young person really sets the stage for what's going to happen later in life. And, like there's this scripture in the Bible that says, train a child the way it should go. And I always think that whomever wrote that particular phrase understood that when you are programming the child, when you're conditioning the child, when you're actually setting the foundation for the child, what's happening in the brain is that these relays are being set up and these messages are being imprinted and they make a huge, huge difference. So,
Yes. Yes. Yes, they do. And it's so funny that you said that because I grew up fighting for the underdog. I grew up looking, defending, like the bullies were scared of me. Like, don't bully around Erin because Erin will defend a person she don't even know because it was right to do. But then I became that underdog. And then I had to kick in because I couldn't find persons like me. Like persons didn't understand my very unique journey because they didn't go through cancer or they weren't amputees or they didn't want to be seen. Like I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be out there. And so I had to start to think about, well, while I'm doing this, maybe I'll inspire someone else and they don't have to look as far as I had to in order to really get it going.
Well, it's so interesting because this notion of there is a teaching that says that we get what we love, we get what we hate, and we get what we fear. And when you talk about the fact that you actually had that already in your consciousness to fight for others, to fight for others,
Yeah.
and life took you into the journey of becoming, quote unquote, others so that you could have a direct experience of that and really know what it's like to be on the other side and then to allow all of that beauty and all that wisdom to come forward and pour through you into everyone that you've met. That's pretty, pretty incredible.
Yes. And especially when you look back at it, because when it was happening, it didn't feel magical.
Yes. I can imagine. I can imagine. So tell me, what are some of the projects you're involved in right now?
Oh, wow. So, some that we're currently doing right now, I'm still in the inclusive education transition for the Bahamas. And so, we have established within the university a Mingos Access Center, which supports all students, faculty, staff, educational spaces, our community on undergraduate studies, technical vocational studies, professional leadership development, resources, and services. So, in a nutshell, we're inviting more persons on the campus to experience what it is to be in an inclusive space, how to amplify your voices, what digital resources are out there. and training our future leaders. We recently, during the summer, completed what we called our Children's Voices program, which is for at-risk learning disabilities and neurodiverse students, which are between the ages of 12 and 19. And so this critical age allowed persons who love art, who love creativity, to use art and literacy to find their creative voices. And to date, we have about 4 of them going into undergraduate art degrees, and where we've been supporting them. They returned back and they painted a beautiful mural in the Mingos Access Center. So we just launched that. But other than that, I am still doing a lot of community involvement. We are developing an annual festival for me becoming a godmother, which will fund a lot of our community and disability initiatives, because we all know funding is always the top tier conversation. You need money to get these things moving. But I am now working on 2028 Paralympic Games. As we know, the Paralympic Games happened in September, and I am also a para archer. So I am fixing on that now for LA.
Oh,
Maybe I'll see
wow.
you in LA in 2028, God's willing.
Beautiful. Well, we hope to see you long before that. Maybe in the Bahamas.
Hey, yes, yes.
We've been talking about that.
I
So,
know, but
yeah.
I feel like this may actually be the year where I say to you, 2025, let's do it. Let's do this. I know everyone's excited about it, and so am I. And so I just thank you all for being so open. Love letters to our bodies is reaching and touching persons in such a very unique way. And that's why I love, respect, and value this space so deeply.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. One of the things that we've discovered is that each person is learning from the other. Each person is being inspired by the other. And everyone is being inspired by your journey and all of the internal beauty that you have and external beauty that you have as well.
Oh,
So
thank you.
we really appreciate you. And I'm really glad.
You.
I'm glad to have found you, Erin Bionic Brown, as I started this conversation saying you're one of my favorite people. I will say that you're my shiro.
Oh, and you are mine. No, honestly, you are my shiro, because I never thought my cancer journey would be able to connect with other persons like all around the world. And we might not have been able to touch each other physically, but we get to connect with each other and ask very vulnerable and healing and open questions and know that the answer we're getting, it's not textbook, it's lived experiences, it's real resources, and it's a safe space.
Yeah, it's a beautiful space. And we appreciate the fact that you're an integral part of it. So we look forward to having you at the next workshop, which is actually, by the way, going to be October 19 and 20. So make a little note on your calendar.
I will.
Hopefully
Done.
you'll be able to do that as well. So if you had a few last words to say to our listeners, what would they be?
When I think about our journey, our personal journeys, and all that we go through, the thing that usually screams to me a lot, or what persons usually say to me, is, how do you continue to show up? Like, persons have seen me without a prosthetic leg, using a wheelchair, using a pair of crutches, sitting on the floor, falling down. Hopefully, some of them have seen me getting back up, running, just really reaching out and trying to figure things out in real time. And I think for a lot of persons, it helps them with evaluating how they are not only coping, but healing, but engaging. And how are they showing up? For most of us, it's very difficult to say to ourselves, it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to not look like everybody else. It's okay to not respond how persons think we should respond. It's okay because you are exactly where and who and what you need to be, and leaning into that belief. So if I had to leave all of you with something, it is to say, lean into the belief that your voice is valuable. Your value is not tied to anyone's narrative, anyone's experience of you. Your value is tied into what you are prepared to stand on, to define yourself as, and what you answer to. Because some of those things you just don't need to answer to. Some of those things you
Exactly.
need to just leave alone and you keep going. And so I always love the title Love Letters to Our Bodies. So I encourage you today, write a love sentence, say a love word, even make a journal entry that sends love to yourself authentically the way you are.
I can only clap. I couldn't have said it better myself. Erin, it's been such a pleasure having you with us today. I just want to thank you again for making the time and look forward to speaking with you again in the very near future.
Absolutely. I receive, I accept, and I shall see you all soon.
Wonderful, wonderful. I'm your host, Gwendolyn Mitchell. You've been listening to Love Letters to Our Bodies, conversations on health, healing, and happiness, with our guest and frequent presenter at the Love Letters to Our Bodies workshops, Erin Bionic Brown. This episode is Losing a Leg and Finding a Life Purpose. In Erin's own words, her divine purpose. Erin is one of the sisters who has turned what could have been a tragedy into a triumph. We lift her up and amplify her work in the world so that others may experience the example, the inspiration, and the joy that she embodies. Thank you for listening. That's a wrap. Thank you so much for listening to Love Letters to Our Bodies, conversations on health, healing, and happiness. To find out more about the Love Letters to Our Bodies project, visit our website at moyoinstitute.org. That's MOYO Institute.org. Follow us on social media and subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. If there are topics you'd like for us to discuss, let us know. Remember, your body is beautiful, girlfriend. Love it.